Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Bridging Impact Podcast. I'm your host, Justin Furtado. So, today's guest is the one and only Tyrell Mara. Tyrell is the founder of the Human Performance Project and an executive leader at Scoop Robotics. In our conversation today, we dive in literally into the deep end and talk about climbing the high dive, pushing ourselves, setting audacious goals, but also being a great team player, being a great leader, an authoritative leader, an influential leader. What is the difference? Well, you'll have to find out by diving in. Hello, Tyrell, and welcome to the Bridging Impact Podcast. I'm thrilled to have you here today and have a conversation about youth development, leadership, playing the long game, finding balance, finding core values, and just being a human. So, with our first question that we are going to ask is, what is your definition of impactful leadership, and how does it show up in both your jobs and with the Human Performance Project and the executive leadership?
Yeah, thanks, Justin, and thanks for having me. And I'll try and add in a little bit of like who I am and my background and history with kind of answering the question. And so for me, right, growing up, I started really in the space of athletics, right, playing basketball. So that was my sport, and middle school and then in high school, and I think really early on, right, when I was 9 years old, like the story of my life really starts at this juncture, right, where I set this huge goal to go and play Division I NCAA basketball. For those of you in the States listening, like kids in Canada, don't set those goals, don't make those dreams. When I was at that age, there was 1, 2, 3 kids in the whole country, really making it down at that Division I level. And so, the first kind of pillar of my life, and it has an aspect of leadership to it, is just around this chasing of audacious goals, like signing up for something that is truly audacious and is going to stretch us and challenge us, and we're going to hit walls. And I think that's important, right? Because underneath this core of this word we call leadership, for me anyways, is this concept of intrinsic motivation, right? Like really being driven deeply from within. And so I didn't know any of this when I was 9, 10, 11 years old, but I had kind of, I call it like I had lucked into jumping into the deep end, right? I was so naive to like how hard it would be going on this journey. And, like we talked about just before coming on, like that's where I learned everything. Like I learned so much about myself going on this, journey of trying to figure out how do I be one of the only athletes, basketball players in Canada to earn this NCAA Division I scholarship. And so that's like the top level, right? Basketball and like this journey and trying to figure things out. And ultimately I succeeded, right? So I ended up being one of the best players in Canada. We won conference, or I guess state, or provincial championships, state championships. Somewhere along that road, it was when I was in grade 7, I had this experience where I was like, the school that I was going to, the grade 11s and 12s, like, and again in Canada we kind of use grade 10, 11, 12 instead of sophomore, etc. And like they were the best players around, and they were like the my idols. Like I worshiped these guys, and like they were everything I wanted to be. And one day we got invited, these little grade 7s, so like similar to you, Justin, like I went to this small kindergarten to grade 12, 200 kids in the whole school, kind of like size of school. And so we got asked to go and play this game of bump, right? Like grade 7, looking up to all these grade 11s and 12s, so excited. Like this is going to be the best day of my life. And like, I need to do whatever I can to impress these guys, right? To show them that I've got what it takes to be like one of them and to go and play at the next level. And that lunch, game of bump ended up being like the worst, most painful, devastating experience of my life, because it was like 25 minutes of just being like totally bullied, and like that's how it goes when you're young and like all this. But I just like something in my mind kind of broke, right? Like I didn't understand. I was so hurt because like I was like, you guys are everything I care about in life. You're who I look up to. Like why are you treating me like this? Why are you like really like pushing me and all my friends around and all that? Anyways, like I like mentally broke down, went to the bathroom and cried, for the rest of the lunchtime. And then I had this this light bulb moment that happened, probably a few weeks later, because it took me quite a long time to decompress, like what happened there? Like why did I feel like that? And I was like walking through the halls of our school, and I was carrying my basketball, and I kind of like looked around, and there's all these, kindergarten kids and grade 1s and grade 2s, and they're all running around, like kind of around my feet at their recess time. But they're also kind of like all looking up at me, right? Like, and I'm, carrying my basketball, going to do my thing. And it just clicked, right? It's like I was in their shoes looking up at these grade 12s, and look at how easy it was for them to have an impact on me, positive or negative. They didn't have to do anything. Like, and for me, it was like, that's the moment. Someone is always watching. Someone is always watching each of us. And for me anyways, that's like such a core component of leadership, right? Is it's like, I have that opportunity to have an impact in every conversation, in every little moment of life. And I think for me, that really excites me. Like, that is what gets me out of bed. And now, I have that opportunity to do it in more of an official capacity with the Human Performance Project. But also, I think I'll kind of wrap this up and hand it back over to you. But like, that's kind of been the personal fire and drive within me. And that's kind of been in all of the stories throughout my life. The things that people take away from you or learn from you or watch you do, and then they'll change their lives based on that influence. There's a responsibility in that. The other side of leadership for me has been like, what does it look like to build world-class teams, right? So like in that basketball journey, we were able to win 2 provincial or state championships, went down, played NCAA Division 1. I captained our team to 2 NCAA conference championships, went to 2 NCAA tournaments, did a very similar thing in the world of CrossFit, right? Trying to qualify for the world, CrossFit games. And then I've kind of done the same thing in the business world, right? Like, trying to understand, how do we build teams, bring people together that are totally different, and kind of focus everyone around a core mission or goal, and then keep that team together for a long enough period of time that they can do something meaningful, right? This is like where the magic and the secret sauce of leadership, I think more even in the business world or with sports teams, really comes in, because you have to figure out how, like, the long game, the longevity of any pursuit is where magic happens, and it's also the hardest part, the deepest layers of leadership, at least that I've seen. So, that's been the other side of, I think, the things that really draw me towards leadership, is like the team and everything that's underneath that, the emotional, components, the strategic thinking and planning, the communication, so I'll pause there, and kind of hopefully maybe you can dig in where you want to go a little bit deeper.
Yeah, no, I'd love to dig in a little bit deeper, especially in that regards, because I feel a very similar way when I was sharing a story about the K through 8, 100 kids. We honestly, and I talked about, we had to do 10 hours of community service before we graduated, but we also had to like mentor or tutor, like 8th graders tutored like 5th graders, and 5th graders tutored like, 2nd graders. So I kind of had this seed planted in my head about like kind of giving back to others that were younger. So just like that, you can be someone, that you're cool. And honestly, I'm looking back, and I'm thinking of idols of myself, when I was growing up, whether it's, Chauncey Billups, because I was a Pistons fan growing up, like looking up and having that influence on other people. I knew I wanted to do that. And I kind of just, honestly, my journey started on the internet with just saying like good morning, everyone, I hope you have a great day, like, and I'll some other message, because I just wanted to impact people in a positive way, like kind of in a similar way. And to kind of fast forward to what you were last talking about, I'd really love to talk more about this like concept of teamwork, especially with leadership, and how to like really like, what do you think's like some of the, obviously, I don't even want to have like a how-to conversation. I want to have just like a conversation on like this, like the foundations. What is it, to use that word, foundations of a great team that brings together, you're talking about, a diverse group of people that have different life experiences.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. Like, there's a lot there, right? And right. There's a lot of similarities between sport, like teams, and corporate teams as well. I think certainly, like, I've really appreciated the life experience of working with, spending almost 20 years working with athletic teams, and being able to translate a lot of that experience to the corporate world and business teams. I think there's, like, if I could just think of a few things that are important, and again, it's going to change a little bit based on, depending on where you want to go, Justin, because like there's a few different places, depending on where you're coming into a team, that's going to affect how you show up potentially and how you play your role as a leader. Meaning, I've been on teams in the corporate world where like being a product manager or on like a marketing team or part of a senior technology leadership team. And if you're not the person driving the team, then you are plugging into this kind of unit, and you still have a leadership potential and capability, but it's generally like you're in this space of influence, right? How can I understand what needs to get accomplished? And hopefully if you've developed some of these kind of core leadership pieces, it's like for the betterment of the people, the humans on the team, and you have to know what that means and what that looks like for each individual. And knowing that the team has a shared vision that is like essentially that all of the work that you're doing individually is going to be in service of that thing, right? And that shared vision, hopefully, or at least what excites me, I should say, is it's big. It's bigger than any of us could do together, right? When you come together at the beginning of the season and we say we want to be the best team in the province or the state or the country, like that's an audacious goal. And so I think, plugging in from an influence perspective, you need to think about, and this was a big part of, I think, my role probably when I played down in the States or, in Oregon at Portland State, and like figuring out how to be a leader on that team, but doing some of it by influence and some of it by authority, which is the other side of leadership, right? If you're coming in and you're managing a team, or you're the head coach of an athletics program or athletics team, you are leading generally through authority. And so I think, one of the, again, stepping back a little bit, like I'm in more of an authoritative leadership role now because it's just the trajectory and the part of the career that I'm in, being a kind of an executive leadership position for a smaller and fast growing team. I think one of the things that's I undervalued, or I didn't even know was on my radar early on, but I've kind of put more weight in, is the ability to have really open and candid conversations as early on as possible, right? So if I take my experience playing basketball, it's funny because I say that and I know that I was doing that really early on, and even in high school, meaning like our goal was to win a provincial championship every year. Like that was our goal I played 5 years of senior basketball, and every year it was the same. And so by the time I got into being, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, anybody who wanted to join the team that was like kind of on the fence, we'd basically go up and say like, look, like here's what the commitment is. Like you need to be at every practice. You can't be late. If you start slipping, we're going to say that you're not allowed being a part of this team, because here's the standard and here's the culture. And now in the business world, I think that conversation is equally important. Like the company that I work at and lead at now is called Scoop Robotics. And, we're really clear when we're building and growing our team that like we are going to, our goal is to have this significant, massive impact on kind of the global clean energy infrastructure. Like we're a technology that helps support that area of the world. That's going to be a really hard thing to do. And like, we need a certain kind of person that is up for that challenge and kind of like figuring out how to build that as we go. It's a hard conversation to have and like to really push into, because, it makes people uncomfortable, because you really are like asking for that commitment, and you're doing it out of service of not only the culture that you're building as a team, but also each individual. So, I think if I just were to kind of touch on one thing that I've learned kind of in the last several years of my leadership career, that is probably a harder, nuanced skill for leaders to do, because you are confronting someone like right at their core, basically saying like, look, like here's the expectation. I'm not telling you this because I want to scare you or intimidate you or make this like a big thing. I'm telling you this because if you can't get at this level, you will burn out, or you will essentially you won't last, right? And that will be not only to a disservice to the team and to our group, it will also be a disservice to you as an individual, potentially, because you're going to waste time, right? That time you're not going to get back if you don't make the right decision. So that's a little bit of a tangent, and I'd be happy to go in other directions or talk about other pieces of that team aspect of leadership, but certainly one I think that's an important one that is again quite nuanced.
100%. Yeah, no, I think especially working with youth, you have to have those expectations early. And honestly, like learning that, because I've been working with youth for about 5 years now, I learned that the hard way early on, because I came there with an attitude of, okay, I'm going to be like, I guess like their big brother, or just, be someone that's positive and there for them. But you got to set those expectations early. And I think that's I honestly did go back and the first summer I was working with kids, oh, she had to be 8 years old. She wouldn't get out of the sports shed because we had to like go inside or something. And she's just like, no, I won't. You're soft. You know, she pretty much said, you're not going to get me out. And at the time, she kind of like went right through me. And I think, you know, I've learned from mistakes, and obviously I think that sometimes it's what we have to do, but like those conversations are so important. And I'm curious, like how you know, obviously you're talking about like, you know, on this team specifically, it's about having this vision, this shared vision, this audacious vision, and committing to it. But how do you keep people accountable for that?
Yeah. Yeah. And like, I just want to touch on, like, I think I love it. 'Cause like what you're describing and like working with youth, and even, you know, like, I mean, really from every age, you know, I have a 4 and a 6-year-old daughter, and like, it's been so fun thinking about, you know, the Human Performance Project, and like building like how do we support and educate and also expose children at every age to the things, the experiences, and like facilitate that environment that allows them to grow holistically. And in a lot of ways that doesn't change, right? Whether you're talking about that 8-year-old student or, you know, 20, 30, 40-year-old, you know, people in the corporate world or kind of in the, you know, middle portion of their life, that challenge and the expectations is a hard thing to do as a leader. But the magic that can happen underneath that is finding the space after the challenge with that person to go a little bit deeper and ask, like, why did that cause friction? You know, in that example, like, what, like why did you feel that need to push back and, like, you know, like really like come at me and challenge me? Like, what was going on there? Like, where is that coming from in you? Like, because, you know, this whole conversation can be about leadership, but really, like, what I get excited about is helping people uncover those layers of themselves, right? And like understand when I talk about foundation, you know, it's like we got to know what's down there, what's deep down there, right? What is the foundation that I'm standing on? Almost always it comes out of experiences that we've already lived through, right? Some of the experiences you've talked about in your life, but you don't get the confidence and courage and grit that comes from that foundation if you don't do the work of actually like understanding like what's underneath all those things. Like, what do I really care about at the end of the day? What do I want to invest the next 40 years of my life and time in? You know, all of those conversations. So I think, like, and that, you know, going back to your question, like, that is a component of the accountability, because, you know, like, the more clear that you can be, and that's maybe the first part, is like setting those challenges and expectations is about clarity, driving clarity. We're all going to sign up for that journey, whatever team or group you're a part of, right? This is like a group thing now, like, and, you know, even things like churches or not-for-profits or different community groups are the same, because you're all going on this mission together. You're a part of a charter or some like shared set of beliefs. And inevitably over time, we all we either evolve in our understanding, or like where we are as a human changes, and like that might cause friction with the team or the group, or like the whatever that thing represents. Or there may be parts of it that we come into and we're not aligned with. And like, again, I think, you know, that is where a lot of the accountability comes mostly in reflection. Like, you know, in a corporate team setting, you know, if we don't hit our targets, or, you know, things aren't going well, like, the whole goal is to come together and do really good, candid, you know, critical, sometimes quite intense conversation, and like meeting and dialogue and debriefing around like what's going on, why are we having issues, or what is the issue. And it's not about, you know, and this is kind of cliche, right? It's not about saying anyone's right or wrong. But again, if we're all signed up for this vision and this mission, and we're all doing it together, and we're all like, you know, like we're committed and we're intrinsically driven to go for it, then we should be able to have this conversation and like really let it all out there, and be okay with, you know, that kind of criticism or feedback coming back to us, because it's not about our egos, it's about us going and achieving this thing. And again, like, those are places that are really hard to have conversations, but underneath those conversations is where you'll either succeed as a team or you'll fail. And like, at the end of the day, that's why you are a group, is because you're striving towards something. So it actually is the most important conversation. And that's the, you know, again, this might be, and you tell me if I'm going too far down the rabbit hole, because those are the conversations that a lot of times don't happen, because they're the hardest, they're the most uncomfortable, they're the most exposing. And so again, you're sacrificing that discomfort for time. because you're going to let time go on. The team is going to continue to not hit those goals or targets or, dreams or aspirations, because you're not having this most important conversation, out of comfort, right? You're kind of the illusion of the comfort zone, that it's easier to not talk about it. But then you get a year or 2 or 3 down the road and you haven't achieved your goals, but really probably deep down you always knew why. But we still, that's the hardest part as humans, is coming and having that open, candid, painful, right, humble, kind of hopefully ego detached conversation in service of not only us learning about ourselves, but also achieving something great together.
I just wanted to take a moment to take that in, but I believe those conversations they're incredibly challenging, and the more we put them off and prolong them, obviously the farther we're going to get from that vision that we're setting, that audacious goal, and it's harmful for the entire team, right? And so with that, I feel like you were kind of talking about it almost from the authoritative kind of state of a leadership. I almost want to shift towards the influential, because for me, myself, I'm very new. I'm a young leader. I'm the new guy on a lot of my teams that I'm on or I'm working on. And I know a lot of people that are listening are young leaders and kind of in the entry level world, so to speak. So how do you be influential, have some of these conversations in a way where you don't have the top-down authority to be meeting here this time, right? I feel like it takes almost a little bit different tactics of relationship building is something that I'm really learning. I first I thought it was all about putting your head down and who can be the best worker, but I realized building relationships with humans is one of the most important parts. I'm curious if you have other thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, no, well said. And I mean, part of what we're starting to talk about is, I love it, by the way. I think one of the biggest gifts that I've had in my corporate leadership and probably athletics as well, has been trying to figure out how to be a leader from a position of influence versus authority. That was a very early part of my corporate leadership journey. But we're almost talking about 2 components. One is the performance, the performance side of leadership, right? So you talk about communication, relationship building, how to bring people together, how to read a room, emotional intelligence, vulnerability, all those end up being really core leadership skills. And then there's the strategy of how do I have an impact, right? Either through influence or authority or some combination of both, and when is the right time to use each. And I think to be totally honest, for me, where I would always start is go, oh man, I want to try and simplify this a little bit, but the more work that we do on ourselves, and again, and so if we just take a step back and talk about, the Human Performance Project, and so all the work that I do on coaching and running workshops and leading, young leaders and corporate, folks in the corporate world and athletes. It starts with this framework, right? Of you have your the goal is you need to escape the deep end, right? Climb the high dive, jump in the deep end, and then pause and reflect, because that's where growth happens. And so that's all we're doing. Our whole life is I'm finding a goal that inspires me enough to get out of my comfort zone, which is uncomfortable. I need to face my fears and climb up the high dive. I need to jump in the deep end, and that's where it's going to be hard, but where I'm going to stress test myself. It's the workout in the gym. The longer you can stay in the deep end, the more learning and growth you have access to. And I say all of that because we so often, and I see so many, young folks missing the first part. What is compelling you to get uncomfortable and go set a goal and go jump off that deep end? And a lot of times the risk or what I see is there's this immediate reaction to go after that shiny thing, that short-term win or something that looks good right now, something that I can accomplish or something that I see someone doing and I want to be like that. I want to go have that success and fame and all of that. And the problem is that when things get really hard, and usually if you're an aspiring leader, there will be times when you're feeling beat down and you want to be more and you want to push, and there's the risk is that there's not enough underneath that. There's not enough foundation and core of what you're doing and how convicted you are on this journey that you're on, whether it's a role that you're in, a business that you're working for, a team that you're leading, a team that you're a part of, a goal that you're striving for. That inevitably or ultimately you'll fail, and it'll be quite hard, right? Because there's just not enough underneath there. And so like for me, I always really try and go back and understand like why are you doing this? Why are you working with basketball athletes and other athletes, or working with corporate leaders? Like what is compelling you to go on this journey, to like play the role that you're playing in a business, or to aspire for this next role? And why that's helpful is because it takes pressure off of needing anything to be more than what it is right now. Like if I know that like I'm working on the skills that I love, I'm doing, I'm intrinsically motivated, I'm like aligned, and I'm doing work that I love every day. I'm ideally around people that really like fill me up with energy, and like you're kind of in your sweet spot. The pressures and anxieties that come with like what needs to happen in the future, those things lessen a little bit. And a lot of times, if I think about even where I've gotten caught up as a leader, it can be like those expectations, right? The like anxieties of like where do I need to be? What do I need to accomplish? Why am I not getting there fast enough? And all of those things actually undermine the impact and influence that we can have right now, right? It almost like distracts our focus. And so like I think that first component of like, why are you doing this? What's the foundation? What's really underneath it all is helpful, because all it does is it allows us to be fully immersed and present in the singular moment of leadership that we're in. And then, then there's all these like skills and tactics and like kind of the performance side of leadership, which is like developing influence. And that could be, how you communicate with your peers. Where are you supporting and building people up versus where are you standing up and sharing what you believe in, because it actually needs to be like a really critical debate. When are you proactively communicating? Like all these like little tactics and skills that make up like really effective leadership. But you can't really do any of that effectively on a long time horizon until you have this like deep sense of intrinsic drive and conviction and like why you're doing it. Like why do you get up? Why do you care? So yeah, I mean, I know I kind of went a little bit all over the place there, but hopefully there were some pieces, right, just around this kind of whole big picture, both of the big pieces and then also the performance side.
Yeah, I mean, as a young person who is experiencing exactly what you just talked about, and like sometimes chasing the shiny objects, like
Yeah.
I'm
feeling maybe like depleted when it's not there when you
Right.
hoped or wanted it to be, and that
Right.
can be like really gutting too, right? That's hard, like a hard, it's tough, it's painful, like to try to navigate those feelings. Yeah, I mean, I feel the same thing, right? Like that's like the constant battle that we're all living in, and that's part of like why part of the work that I do is this thing called the deep end mindset, which is just the framework. The other part of the work that I do on myself every day, but I also coach people through, is more of the one-on-one coaching of like how can you equip yourself with tools and rituals and like knowledge so that you mitigate as much of that, like the time travel, right? Like that's really part of what I've learned is it's all anytime you think about like whether it's stress, anxiety, depression, shame, guilt, a lot of those things happen when we're fast forwarding up to the future, to those like stories and what ifs that don't exist and may never exist, or you're reliving challenges and traumas or experiences from the past, and so like how do we be here? How do we just be right here, right? And like there's a whole like suite of human performance, like the Human Performance Lab is what that's called, which is really like the tactical stuff. It's not, in my opinion, that stuff isn't really huge, like isn't the holy grail until you get the foundation right. But it's important because then you just need to sustain. That's life in the deep end, is I need to get up every day. Like when I was, one of the chapters that I went on was trying to go from basically being a new athlete to qualifying for the Tokyo 2020 Olympics, throwing discus and track and field. And there was a point where like every day it was like, okay, I need to get up, work for 12 hours, drive 120 kilometers, some 190-ish miles, for 1,782 more consecutive days, because that's how much work it's going to take for me to even earn the chance to qualify, right? That is a long time horizon. And so you need all these tools to allow you to sustain the journey that long. So that's like the Human Performance Lab side is like where I think that work becomes really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I was gonna hope that you could expand more upon the foundations of kind of laying the foundation for the journey and having that for when the going gets tough.
Yeah, I mean, like, and that's, I mean, look, at the end of the day, like for me, there's a bunch of different ways to come at this, and this is where, like, I think like Justin, the work that you're passionate about, and you know, the voice that you're kind of giving to the community that you're building is so important, because everyone's at a different point in their journey, and you know, they need different things, or need to have a different conversation, or need a different question to be asked, so they can really like unlock the next piece. And so in some ways, if I could oversimplify it, it's like, especially when I'm working with people, and you know, it may be like, I don't really know what the next step is, or like where to go. And in some ways, like, you know, that's like why I wear shirts like this, is like, all you have to do is get in the deep end. Like, if you can just climb up any high dive, right, set a goal, look fear right in the face, and acknowledge, like, be brave enough to go right through it, right? That's climbing the high dive, and jump into the deep end and do something really hard that you care about. If you can just accomplish that, you know, and whether it's for a week or whether it's for a year, like, that gives you the basis upon which you can then start to reflect and ask yourself, like, what was it about that experience that I loved? Where was I in flow? What things totally drained me? What did I learn about myself? Were there any skills that I picked up in that journey that I actually think I want to keep investing in chapters of my life, right? So like, we need that journey so that we can reflect and actually like pull out the learning and the growth. And so like that piece, that becomes the foundation, because then we just literally go right back to the comfort zone over time. You know, we rest, we recover, we pause, we learn, we grow. And then when you get back to the comfort zone, you kind of look back up on the horizon and you're like, okay, like, you know, for me, like, I played NCAA Division I basketball. Like, what else could I do, right? What's the bigger horizon, the bigger high dive? And you go, you know, you just go through that exercise again. So again, I think, you know, we kind of, as a society, we've like overshot or over-indexed our attention and focus on like this thing called goal setting, and totally neglected what it looks like to really meaningfully and deeply reflect, and then integrate, like acknowledge and pull out those learnings, and then pull those back into like the core of who we are. And you know, I think that's, I always am so inspired by people who have, you know, gone through challenging experiences in their life and like hard parts of their journey, because inevitably, right, we all know this, that's where the most learning and growth is, and the most meaningful insights about ourselves. So like, you know, it's all connected, but I think if you can just get in the deep end, like, and you can just take some time to reflect on your experience afterwards, you will build a foundation. And then all you have to do is just keep doing that over and over again for your whole life. And by the way, like, you'll be fulfilled, you'll be, you know, euphoric, because you're living in the present moment. And, you know, here's, Justin, where I think, like, where I do a lot of thinking is, if you can find something early on enough that you care enough about it at that deep enough level that you could invest in that skill for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years, like, you look at the most impactful people in life, in, you know, in our world and in history, their body of work is like 40 years. And then at the end of, you know, their life or their chapter, there's all of this public facing, you know, fame and celebrity and stories and, like, you know, the followers and all that kind of stuff now. But like, nobody spends the time to be like, oh, what did you do for those 40 years where it was just you? Right? Like that's where the story happens. And, you know, those people end up being like living really happy and fulfilling lives for the most part as well, which doesn't really get talked about. So yeah, this is a little bit more on kind of the deep end mindset as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, you know, in our society, we talk about we met on Instagram, right? On Instagram, you can see everyone posts what's best, right? I posted the Rams game. They're like, oh man, he's at the Rams game. Like, that's so cool, right?
I wish I was there.
I wish I was there, right? And you know, I post something, I got a new job, you know, or I did this and did that, and it's like, why am I not there yet, right? But it's our own journey, and I love that you talk about, like, for everyone that's listening, we all are on our own journey, and I'd love for you to, like, honestly give like a vivid, like, descriptive, like, story on, like, the deep end, climbing the deep end, going up, climbing up to the high dive, jumping off, and reflecting. Because I have a little bit that I could share right now. Is I just moved to Los Angeles with my girlfriend that I mentioned before pre-pod, and it was hard. It was very challenging for me because I was, you know, from the Pacific Northwest. Eugene, Oregon was the biggest city that to LA. It was big and it was different. And I was like, you know, I was substitute teaching, and you know, I felt out of place, right? And then you know, during the holiday break time in December, I had a lot of time for reflection and to pause, and honestly, it's one of the best things for me. And I feel like I grew so much more. And then I came back, and I'm fresh.
What did you learn?
Go ahead.
What did you learn? Like, what were some of the insights that like you felt were really important from that reflection?
I think honestly, if I could take number one is, you talked about kind of like time travel. Like I was traveling in time. Like I'm a visionary, but sometimes as a visionary, I read something about a telescope and a microscope, and I was just using my telescope on where I was going, and like everything was for a future date, and I just wasn't being and living in the moment, because honestly, a lot of me really wanted to just I was super uncomfortable, and it's my way of like getting almost out of reality is just to look ahead, right? And to not be in the now. It's like, oh, this is all for something else. This is for something else later, Justin. But I was really just super uncomfortable, like, and I didn't want to sit in that. I didn't want to feel in that. And having some conversations, obviously, with my wonderful girlfriend who helps me become a better person, right? It's about kind of being in the now and like kind of facing where you're at. Like this is part of life, right? I think that's one of the things is like when you go through school, like K through 12, and then you go to college, like everything is there for you, and then you have to like figure it out all on your own, and kind of try and find your own mark. And I'm like, I want to make an impact so bad. I'm looking at all these other influencers that look like they're making so much impact, and I want to do it right now, right? I want to do it right now.
Yeah, I mean, Justin, and I'm just curious, right? Have you ever had anyone in your life come up to you afterwards and like tell you like, hey, that thing that you said one time, or I saw you do this thing when you were in high school, or like that had an impact on me. That like after the fact, have you ever had someone come up and like share that with you?
Yeah, I've had a few people share that with me about Inspire One, a nonprofit organization that I was a part of with one of my close friends. I've had a few people from creating content. I've had quite a few people reaching out and like just saying they appreciate. And honestly, a lot of times people will say it like when you have a few drinks in your hand and you're back with buddies, and they're like, "Dude, it makes my day." Like they don't say anything, they don't like it, they don't comment on anything, but people like kind of going back to the beginning of our conversation. People are watching. And you can impact, and that.
No, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you because I'm loving this. Like because you're doing it. Because here's the other side. Here's maybe what I've like learned to let go of a little bit in the last 5 years, or probably about that is, and it was actually reading this book Sapiens, right? So like one of those like
I've read it, yeah.
Right, looking back at like, and I love this because there was this kind of passage in that, and he was talking about like 10,000 years ago, or maybe even longer. It's like there's evidence of things that happened, right? Like whether it's like looking at the plains in different areas of the world and like seeing how tribes were migrating, and in like hunter-gatherer style, and like you could see, he talks a little about like where you could see that major like battles were fought. We don't know any of those people's names. Like we don't like, and think about 500 years ago. People who were changing the world and having a huge impact in life. We know some of that, but like if you think about the fact that like in 1,000 years from now, who's gonna remember you? Who's gonna remember me? No one, guaranteed. And that's okay. Like right. Life isn't about like this whole like this brand or this thing that we can put forward so that people talk about us and know us and remember us. It's like you have done the most important work in your life by having that impact on that person, that didn't ever tell you, but you slightly changed the trajectory of their life. Like for me, that is one of the most important gifts and permissions that's been important to give myself, right? Because like I think there's an aspect of all of us that are leaders, and we care about the work that we do, and we care about making the world better and people better, that like you just want it to be bigger, you want it to be more. But at the end of the day, like if you slightly change the trajectory of one person's life, that's really important, right? That's really meaningful. Like I grew up listening to hip hop, and Tupac in one of his interviews, right, talks about this idea that like I may not be the one that changed the world, but I want to be the one that inspires the mind that changes the world, right? So like all these things have the butterfly effects, and at the end of the day, like that long story of being remembered is kind of a bit of a fallacy of our egos, I think, right? It's a thing that that's really hard not to tell ourselves. and it's always there. It's always talking to you, and it's always telling you like you should be them, or like you're not as good as them because they have more followers than you, or more likes than you, or they're on this YouTube channel or this podcast or whatever it is, and like it doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter. Be fulfilled. Chase an audacious goal. Figure out a way to show up every day and like be on fire for what you're doing. And like, yeah, in 40 years from now, when you've done that for 40 years straight, you'll probably be there. And the problem is that not enough people are doing the work right now to figure out what is that long game? What is the pilgrimage that I'm gonna like navigate in life? You know, how am I gonna create a straight enough path as I continue to learn and reflect and grow and find deeper skills that I want to invest in longer periods of time in? Because like that's actually where like mastery and impact and legacy happens, is you have to like accumulate enough, right? I talk about like this body of work. It has to be big enough. And like Steve Jobs has this awesome quote on it, which is like, at the end of the day, it's hard. And that's why everyone quits. Nobody like spends enough time to really understand like what is that thing deep down within to go the distance. And sure, like everybody celebrates the few that do, but if you actually look back, it's like the work that they did to like navigate that path, just like Steve Jobs, like it's so few and far between. But like we all have that within us. We all have those ingredients. But either you need to both have the experience, you need to jump in the deep end to like, you know, like your move is the epitome in some ways of like jumping in the deep end or being in the arena, right? And like that's where a lot of that learning and growth comes from, and hopefully that will like inform, you know, the next decisions in your life to change that course a little bit so that the next chapter is a little bit longer and a little bit bigger, and then you cycle all that learning in and you do the next chapter. So I think it's all connected, but like being here right now and having the ingredients to be able to do that is really important.
Right, and being here right now in this conversation, I think that's one of the things that I learned from when I talked about my first podcasting is like, oh, how's this conversation? What am I going to have to edit out of this? Like during conversation, mid-conversation, thinking about this, like, how am I going to distribute? How many people are going to listen? Are people going to like this? And instead, it's just like being here. And I would love to ask you, what is your, you know, I think you've talked about it a little bit, but what is your, you know, audacious goal?
Yeah, I mean that's a really good question. And like, so just bear in mind, right? I've been doing goal setting for, you know, probably like 25 years. Every year, right? My family, again, amazing. Like for me, I'm blessed with a family that just did. My parents like just knew or somehow did so many things right? And like you'd asked about like what is the vivid experience of jumping in the deep end? And I won't share the story now so that we don't kind of lose track. But like, when I was 12, as part of me going on this journey to play Division I, my parents like shipped me over to Philadelphia to like live for a summer, and you know didn't know anybody, just like, and this was like back a long time ago. So you literally just went on a plane and you hopped off the other side and you hoped someone was there. You know, cried myself to sleep every night. It was like the hardest experience that I had been through, and that, you know, like I think going back to like just my parents somehow knew that rite of passage. Right, that challenging experience would, you know, pay off in the long run, which it did in a lot of different ways. Like, you know, I think one of my concerns is that there's a lot of people today that don't go through those like rites of passage, right? The really hard, challenging experiences that are where you know, again, you learn like what's down underneath it all. So yeah, I mean, I think going back to like goal setting and, you know, I've done that piece for a long time, and it started off with very focused, specific, audacious goals, right? NCAA Division I basketball, you know, going to the CrossFit Games, building a $500 million business in one of the early ventures. You know, so what I've realized, I was explaining this to someone else the other day, is like one of the downsides, the risks of this concept of an audacious goal, which is like, let's say, you know, 3, 5, 10 years out on the horizon, is that what I've actually learned is if you set it too specifically, like with too much cement, it's too rigid, right? So like going to the Tokyo 2020 Olympics is like, that's a very specific goal. Like it has a timeline, it has a place, it has a whole bunch of steps, and you can map them out. The downside to, like, I lived this, right? Like I spent 5 years of my life almost trying to do that, and I failed, right? I didn't make it, like broke my hip, almost lost my family, my wife and my daughters, like just through the trauma and intensity that was that journey, you know, had to put my career on hold. I didn't appreciate the reason why I was actually going on that journey, for me, it was just so, I basically took the model of goal setting for basketball and like applied it to track. The problem was like my life was different. I had family, kids, a career, leadership career. And what I learned from that is like, okay, if you're going to set that goal and it's going to be that specific, you got to be so confident. Like in that case, one of the mistakes that I made was that I wasn't willing to get divorced. I wasn't willing to put my total career on pause, like full stop. And I was willing to relocate. Like I was living in a different, place for a part of that journey. But like those are reasons, like I didn't acknowledge or really appreciate the level of sacrifice that comes with such a specific and obviously such a world-class goal. And so you asked the question around like, what are my audacious goals today? I actually think I've taken a bit of a step back from having those really focused specific goals, and taking a little bit more of an approach where I like this idea of going on what I call like 10-year pilgrimages. So I think if we commit to anything in life, so the Human Performance Project, me running these workshops, the Deep End Mindset, and coaching people in a one-on-one capacity, part of my vision is to just do that work for 10 years and see what happens, right? Because if you look at anyone who's committed 10 years worth of time into a specific pursuit, what comes out on the other end is like pretty amazing. And there's not a lot of people who have done that, but you'll start seeing it, right? We've been doing this for 10 years, or like it wasn't until 10 years that we saw this impact or something happen. I just think it's a really long time that means that like if you're committed for that long, you actually just stand out. There's no one else around you once you've spent that much time. So I like that idea, because then with this work, it gives me more room, right? It gives me more latitude to understand like, okay, like what pieces of this are really important, right? What, like this body of work is the Human Performance Project. There's like specific things that I deliver and do, but I also have the opportunity to like jump on a podcast like this because I love and appreciate the work you're doing. And like, I can kind of fit it into this vision and this pilgrimage that I'm on. And then I think that, so the same kind of audacious goal on the leadership side, the corporate side, has been to find an organization and a core leadership team that truly has the opportunity to build a business that, will change a part of the world in clean energy and renewables, because like that's obviously really important. And then be in a leadership position where I can simultaneously help realize that vision and be pushed way beyond my limits as a leader, right? As a strategic thinker, as a manager, as a people leader, to like grow and learn. Right, the idea that like if a company grows exponentially and I can be humble enough to learn along that growth curve, I'll end up pretty good at the very end of it, regardless of whether that is and like where that ends up being and how long the journey is. So again, like it's in leadership, it's in strategic thinking, it's in executive management, all those things that I care about, but like I'm less concerned about the outcome. Like I don't need $1 billion exit of the company. Like that doesn't really matter to me, but it's on the table if we all do a great job. And so, yeah, I mean, hopefully that helps. It's a little bit different than maybe like the status quo answer, but it's come out of like me kind of trying to evaluate this process and like what are the important parts of it for 20 years.
Right, and keeping the other important parts of it that are important to you outside of what we think of as the career, right? Like you being a family man and really being there and having your time with your your two kids. And so
yeah, and that's
I can imagine that
one thing on that, right, is like, and apologies, I know I interrupt you there, like the other side of all of this is like you can't do everything, like you really have to, like this whole concept of like you have to place a bet. And so first of all, spend a lot of time thinking about what those bets are going to be, and then go for it, right? So like for me in my life, there's trade-offs of being like, for example, like I'm committed 60 plus hours a week to running and growing this business, this technology company with the founding team and with our team. And like it means that I only coach one person at a time. Like I never take on more than I can bite off on the human performance side, and that's a sacrifice. And then I have my family, and like that's pretty much my whole life, but I've made that choice, right? Like I think that's the most important thing, is like I believe so much in kind of the pieces of the puzzle. But I'm also cognizant that like don't try and do more than you can, because that's part of the discus chapter for me, the track and field chapter. It's like you can't do all these things, right? You're gonna either fail or you're gonna have to sacrifice things that you may not have intended on wanting to when you first started.
That's actually one of my philosophies for this year is like I want to do everything. I want to like, read for 30 minutes, yoga, then I have my full days of work, and then I have coaching, and then, I want to make sure I'm writing. Oh, and then I want to spend time with my girlfriend. And then it's like my philosophy this year is the less is more, right? Like it's okay to just read 10 minutes. It's okay to read, 3 times a week. Oh, it's okay if podcasts are your learning for the day, or fitting in, running or playing basketball as your kind of social outlet and hanging out with your friends. Some of those things is like I'm just trying to like do less and just like and get out more. And I actually found it to be already a lot more rewarding. And I'm focusing a little bit more on just connecting with people in general. And that's obviously just been a challenge of the COVID and the pandemic. But as we wrap up this podcast, I'd really love for you to obviously, share some resources, and I'd love for you to plug yourself and your resources that you have provided. But also, what advice do you have for upcoming young leaders and coaches like myself?
Yeah, so in some ways there's not much of a plug because I'm not really like the places that just to kind of speak to it is like the humanperformanceproject.com or on Instagram Human Performance Project, or myself, right, Tyrell Mara. But really, like every month I run a free webinar workshop on the deep end mindset. So like it's literally like there's like 3 workbooks, it's a full session, recording, all that kind of stuff, and it's really just about like where are you on this journey? Are you in the comfort zone? Are you like trying to go through the fear but you're getting blocked? Are you trying to survive in the deep end? Or are you figuring out how to like learn and like get unstuck from your experiences? Because I think that's it, right? So it's like really trying to provide that framework, and then obviously the coaching side is a little bit different in terms of the one-on-one capacity. So that's the, and I think you and I share this, right, Justin, which is like I want people to like call me, text me, send me a message, right? Send me a DM on Instagram, shoot me an email, and like I care about talking to people and like understanding and like the highlight of this conversation for me is you talking about this journey that you're currently on and your move, right? Like that decision and the reflection that you did in December, and like what I'm itching to see and I'll be watching, right, for your journey is like what 10-year pilgrimage are you going to start to like home in on, right? Because like I think over time like you're going to find that thing. So I think that like those types of conversations are really exciting for me. In terms of like, and so, all the resources that I focus on are like really in this space of like the deep end mindset and those workshops and trying to get, as many people to those as possible. From a leadership or development perspective, like for me, because it's the language that's accessible and it makes sense for me, it's like really understanding like where are you on that journey? Are you like feeling the walls of the comfort zone kind of like trap you in? Are you, the conversation around fear and the neuroscience of fear is obviously really important. So like, do you want to go for something deep down in the back of your head, but you're too afraid to like go for it and take, like start climbing and like get up at the top of the, the 10-meter tower? Or are you like, you really care and you want to go for something, but you feel like you may not have the tools to like go on that journey and sustain the effort? And what does that even look like? I think I just identifying like where are you on the journey, and then, just to be perfectly candid, like the coaching side of the work that I love doing, it's not rocket science. It's like build a very simple ritual of things that we know physiologically and like cognitively fill us with energy: meditation, gratitude, nature, social activity, exercise, cold exposure. There's a whole list of things. Put together a program that you can commit to for 30 days without missing a single day, and reflect, have a journal and write for 5 minutes a day at the end of every day or in the morning, at one time a day. And for anyone, that's listening to this or that ends up like, I always like, this is part of the challenge of the workshop is like, almost no one will do it, guaranteed. And literally like 99% of people will not be able to put in even that 10 minutes a day, because it's hard, it gets challenging, it's somewhat uncomfortable, right? Sitting and meditating for 5 minutes, if you haven't done that and you don't have a practice. But for those who do, what you see is like at the end of 30 days, the world hasn't changed, but those people kind of like stand up and they're like, I'm noticing these things in my life that are like starting to like come a little bit more clear, or like starting to really like flow, and like that is like just the tip of the iceberg of like, again, I think about like where magic happens. Consistency over complexity, like just doing the work every day is like the most important thing that we all can be doing as humans. Certainly for leaders, it's like where we'll be able to unlock the most learning as we go on like these big audacious journeys and pilgrimages. So I mean, I think that if I could leave anyone with like one thing to test and try, it's like, that's it. Daily ritual, protocol, journal, 30 days straight, and just evaluate, like, what do you learn? How did you grow? What was the experience like? We all can do that, right? We all can commit to that.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think it's, it's challenging, but also for yourself, like to see where you have gone, like it's so rewarding. Like I started writing and journaling, like basically my freshman year of college. And, I don't think it was super consistent my first 2 years, but now it's consistent. Now I switched from morning to evening. Like sometimes I like just to shift it, switch it up a little bit. But it's honestly hasn't been hard for me to go from morning to evening because it's such an important part of my identity. And I've been doing it for years, right? So it's just like start with something for 30 days. Right now I'm doing my flossing my teeth for 30 days, right? I think there are days where I'm like, I don't even want to do this, but I just gotta, do it, get the job done, right?
Yeah, I mean,
so just simple things like that.
Exactly, and they're kind of almost laughable, but like actually, like those are the small like things that compound over, again, like time. You want to come back to the most important part of this conversation? It's time. Whatever we choose to do, like build on itself, that compounds.
Right.
And we learn and grow, and so like all these little rituals I think are really important in just getting that consistency of habit and discipline. And yeah, I love it. I love the flossing.
Yeah, consistency and habits for sure. And I know you mentioned your Instagram handles and where people can find you, but I'll give you another chance so people can really hear it good. So where can people find you?
Yeah, I mean, kind of any platform that you're on, just search for my name, Tyrell Mara, or the Human Performance Project. And if you're interested, send me a message, because that's what I frankly care about. I don't care about the followers or the likes. If the content resonates, that's awesome. But like, the connection is the most important piece. So yeah, I appreciate what you're doing, Justin. And I'm excited to watch, right, and be a part of like cheering you on over the longer time horizon, especially kind of knowing the foundation that you've kind of built right now in this new chapter in LA. So just keep doing it, man. Keep doing the work.
Thank you so much. Thanks for coming on today, Tyrell. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Bridging Impact Podcast. We'd love it if you would like, subscribe, leave a comment and a review on whatever platform you're on. It's the best way to help us grow. We appreciate you for doing that. We'll shout you out on social media. I'd also love if you connected with me on social media. Let me know your thoughts. And this is why I do it. I want to share knowledge and wisdom from experienced leaders to people like yourself and myself, so we can have this dialogue and move forward, make an impact on the world. So stay tuned, stay subscribed. Cheers.